Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I'm Tom Ricks. I'm here with my mother, Josie Lawson. And we are doing another episode in a series called Mommeries. The last one we did was basically at the fringes of her divorce with my father. And it was in the 80s in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, I could talk about that, and I could talk a little bit about my last year of college. My father died before I graduated. So, ACT Studios, I don't remember if I got involved with them before or after I went back to college. The woman who ran the place, it was her baby was Molly Benson. And she was messed up. She had good reason to be messed up. She grew up in basically a mafia family, and she'd been sexually molested as a child and everything else. So she had issues, including body image issues. She was always, and appearance issues. She was always, she'd go to Mexico for shots that are supposed to make you look younger or keep you younger and stuff, and she was always taking strange pills and things, and she was an exorexic and anorexic, so she was always rail thin. She was a messed up human, and I felt some sympathy for her, but she was hard to be around. A lot of people would stay for a while and then leave because she was difficult. She was always pretty good to me until a few years later. She was holding a workshop in Atlanta, and we reconnected, and I went to the workshop, and she was even more messed up. She was a crazy person. Anyway, and I ended up leaving the workshop early because at that point I couldn't deal with it. Anyway, she was a heavy smoker. And smokers were not supposed to be around the equipment. Smoke is bad for the recording equipment. But, she just always had the attitude, if you don't like smoking, there's the door. Which is what happened at I think it was Nashville or Memphis. I can't remember which one it was in. And she was smoking so heavily you could not see your hand in front of your face. And I couldn't take it, so I left because I was dying. I can't handle smoke like that. I get violently ill. I guess I went to an allergist, and they told me that, you can't be allergic to cigarette smoke, which doesn't make sense to me because you can be allergic to a lot of everything else. Why not that too? Why can't you be allergic to tobacco and its the products that result from it? But anyway, I suppose I was sensitized by living with my father for so many years. I just can't handle smoke of any kind, and tobacco smoke. Cigarette smoke is absolutely the worst. Anyway, but the point is, back to talking about ACT Studios. I learned some things there. I got she set up my first headshot, and it was pretty good. My first professional headshot. I had one my freshman year in college that was very serious. Very serious with my little bow in my hair that I wore at the time. Velveteen bow. But yeah, I got a pretty good headshot out of that. And she was very encouraging. Everybody in the class was very encouraging, and I learned some things about. And I took a couple of awesome workshops through her. I took a workshop with Tony Barr, who I don't know if it's still one of the standards in the business, but it used to be. He wrote a book called, I think it's Acting for the Camera. Um, Wonderful workshop that, yeah, I have a tendency to pull the rug out from under myself. Um, Anytime it looks like I'm getting somewhere, I have to undermine myself. Um, I think that's just my conditioning from childhood. Um, I will never succeed at anything. And some little thing inside my head says, you can't do this, you have to fail. Boom! So, so I took the workshop, and he was awesome. It was like a two or 3 day workshop. I can't remember, weekend workshop. And it was great. I did great, and he just raved over me, and he loved me and wanted to, when we had meal breaks, he would sit next to me and talk to me, and I guess I was getting too close to approval, so when we finally filmed my scene, it was a scene about a woman who had a one-night stand, and the next morning, the guy she slept with, was madly in love and thought they were going to be together forever. Um, and she's kind of, weaseling her way out of that, and it's awkward and uncomfortable. And my scene partner was a guy, and he wasn't there terribly long, but he eventually, he was a little person, um, and he was an awesome talent who went on to become Timmy on Passions.
Oh wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so that was my scene partner for that scene, and he was wonderful, and we had a great time the first few times we went through it. Then when we went to record it, I decided to be stupid and wear baby doll pajamas for the scene that made me so uncomfortable that I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't get into the scene, and Tony Barr was so disappointed in me. He was like, "What happened? You were doing this and this and this, and all that went away. Why did that happen?" It was because I pulled the rug out from under myself, which I undermine myself all the time. If it looks like I'm going to get somewhere, I have to undermine myself. So anyway, so that I also took a class with a workshop with Cliff Osmond. That was awesome. He's another. He has passed away a long time. I hate that term, passed away, but you know what I mean. He died back in I think in the early 2000s. May have been the late, whatever. But anyway, he was wonderful, and he helped call attention to some of my habits when I'm acting that helped me a lot. Mostly my I'm ADHD, so I tend to wiggle when I'm unfocused, bounce my knee, wiggle my foot, rock back and forth, which is what Skip was teasing me about before we made this recording. He said I looked like a character in a video game waiting to go into battle because I was just, rocking back and forth. It's what I do. So anyway, so this was an awesome scene. It was a scene from a film that Meredith Baxter Birney did, who she was playing a girl putting herself through college with prostitution. And this guy was, she and this guy are talking about it, and they're attracted to each other and everything else. And it went really well. Of course, the scene went extremely well. And I didn't undermine myself on that one, which is sort of a surprise. I did really well. And he asked me, he filmed the scene like 3 or 4 times the first day, and then again the second day, and then he was like, "What did you see?" And I said, I immediately picked up on all the things that I thought I did wrong, and he's like, "Why are you focusing on that? Here's what you did right, this and this and this and this and this, stop focusing on what you've done wrong and focus on what you're doing right." And one of the things that I kept doing was not turning for the camera the way I should. So the camera had to move around to catch me at the right angle when I was talking. And of course, when I saw it, that's all I thought about. Oh, I screwed up. I was supposed to turn this way and I didn't do it, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, And then he commented on, early on, during the scene, the guy and I are having an argument, and I kept wiggling my foot. And he told me, he said, I have a hyperactive son. And he said, he talked about the idea of hyperactivity, ADHD, that your brain is not making the connection that you want it to make. So hey, Bones, where are you going? Sorry.
That's fine.
Bones was going to go in the cat room and eat cat turds, which he loves to do.
For those not familiar, Bones is a dog that belongs to my mother that likes to eat cat turds.
He was my mother's Chihuahua, and he's a sweetheart, but he's 14 years old.
Eats cat turds.
He does like to eat cat turds. We call it the kitty biscuit buffet. Anyway.
An eater of turds. Anyway, yes, please continue.
Well, anyway. So foot wiggling, back to foot wiggling. So the brain is struggling to make the connection between what your body's doing and the brain's doing, which is why you take things like Ritalin to help with it, is because the hyperactivity is due to you trying to force that connection. And if you boost yourself a little bit, the energy, whatever, it helps make that connection. So that's what that's all about. And I didn't express that very well, but I'm kind of brain dead right now. So anyway, so he pointed that out to me and was saying, you're trying to make it happen rather than letting it happen. And that was a huge revelation for me as an actor. I've had some moments like that in my life that looked like huge breakthroughs for me as an actor, and that was one of them, because I began to focus the hyperactivity. Where are you going, Bones? Come here, dude. Okay, whatever. I'm going to run over here and sit in the chair now. I began to focus all of that hyperactivity into my performance. So I became hyper-focused, which really helped my performances a lot. And it carried over into the next day, and he commented on it. It makes it that much more intense if I'm instead of doing things to force the connection, if I let the connection happen and just pour that hyperactive energy into focus and into what I'm trying to, what the character wants, and keep my body very still, and all of that. It was a revelation. It was awesome. Molly really liked me. She thought I was pretty good. Like 99% of the people I've worked with think, I guess. At least in the past. I don't know about here in California what they think. I know at least a couple of people really like my performance technique, or whatever my performance is. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, I suppose you want me to talk about the time that that she was working on that stupid sitcom.
It was memorable, but yes, that stood out just because I've never seen a laugh track before. But I mean, you don't have to. You can keep.
Well, it's part of what happened was that she was working on this ridiculous, awful derivative sitcom that she hoped to sell in Hollywood. She had lots and lots of friends in L.A. Obviously, Tony Barr and Cliff Osmond were friends of hers. That's why they came to Denver to do workshops for her little, film acting group. But she hoped to sell it there. It didn't sell. But anyway, one of the things she did for that, she needed a scene that was a waiting room. And so you, Greg, and Christy, I think, came in and did the scene. I don't remember much about it except you guys making and flying paper airplanes through the whole scene. I remember her talking about auditioning with you. She had fun auditioning with you. She read a scene with you. So, but she had fun with that. Yeah, I don't remember much about that else. I know that she would make male actors so angry they would put their fist through the wall in the studio.
Well, the main reason it stood out to me is because she had us make a laugh track for the sitcom. So we're all sitting in the audience watching a scene, and they have us all laugh, and it was so fake and so canned that I've never been able to watch anything with a laugh track the same way ever again.
I've always hated laugh tracks, so live audience is always much better. But
that's true.
The reaction is either honest or it's not. But it was always done to make people at home feel more comfortable. Well, let's see. Your dad and I left at the end of '84, like January 1st. And at the time, that's when I came back. I was working at Walden Books. Did I talk about that last time?
No, we didn't do Walden Books either. Yeah, I was trying to figure out what you wanted to talk about and go from there.
I was working at Walden Books, which your father hated. He thought I should be at home. And once I was working there, he got mad that I was working evenings. I mean, we're talking a retail business, and he was like, he wanted me to work days. He didn't want me working nights and weekends. He didn't want me working when he was home. And I kept telling him that's not how it works. It's, you have to work nights and weekends. Everybody does. Nobody gets to work just weekdays. And so that was a point of contention between the two of us.
Well, if he wanted you to have an office schedule, maybe he should have done something to give you actual work experience instead of working at a minimum wage retail job in a mall.
Yeah, well.
Anyway.
Yeah, whatever. He didn't want me working at all. He wanted me home taking care of him and stuff. So, anyway, and that was a whole thing in and of itself. The manager, I won't say her name because she's moved on to other things, and she was not happy, so I'll excuse a lot of what she did back then because she was so miserable. But she was a good manager as far as getting the store running and getting sales going. She was a terrible manager as far as human beings go. Her people skills sucked. And one of the things I got frustrated was every time I had a review, I was always going to get the middle pay raise. She always geared it to give me the middle pay raise. I was not going to get the extreme, the high pay raise. She wasn't going to give me the low pay raise because she knew that was BS, because I was a really good employee and customers liked me because I loved helping people in the bookstore. And I was really
Walden Books was pretty fantastic.
It was
back when you that was back when you had bookstores and malls, and it was pretty awesome.
Yes, and I was good at, people would come in and describe a book to me. My son has to read a book about a kid who plays video games, and you're talking about Ender's Game. Oh, yeah, that's it, So, and even if I hadn't read the book, I read a lot of fly leaves and back covers of books, so I knew what a lot of the stock was about, even if I hadn't read it. So I was really good at that, and she told me people come into the store specifically because they like you, and trust you to help them find what they want. So, anyway, but then we'd go into reviews and she'd say things like, "You take too long making displays." And I would point out that was because she wanted me to do the displays her way. She didn't allow for anybody else to do anything else. She wouldn't let you do it and then leave it. She would make you do it over and over and over. And I'm like, yeah, I take too long making displays because I can't read your mind. And then she ends up doing it herself. After all that, she makes you do it over and over and over, and then she does it herself. And it's like, oh, come on. Just don't ask me to do displays if you don't like the way I do displays. Do them yourself. That's what you want to do. And she was the kind of person who basically did everything in the store because she didn't like the way anybody else did anything. So it was an exercise in frustration. At one point, we were having a review, and she would say, you do this well and you do this well, but because she's going for the middle raise, the 3-cent raise, 3 cents an hour instead of the 5 cents an hour. And because every penny counts, right? And she started we're starting the review, and she starts to say, well, what you do well. I said, just skip over that. This is all crap. Just tell me what you think I do wrong and give me my 3 cents an hour and I'll leave. She got really, I was very direct. And I have a tendency to be direct with people like that because I don't like BS, and I don't respect you just because you're the boss. I may start out respecting the boss because they're the boss, but if they turn out to be incompetent or have other problems, I have a tendency to say what I think. And with her, I always said what I thought, and she really didn't appreciate that. But she kept me on. And I was going to school at the time, too. So I was really busy, and Richard was not happy about it because between school and work, I wasn't home as much as he wanted me to be. And actually, I had... Let's see. I'm jumping ahead because I was still working at Walden's after I graduated. That's after I graduated, and I started taking a tap class, which I really enjoyed. It was on Wednesday mornings at 10 o'clock. So I would ask her to let me have Wednesday mornings off. And she consistently scheduled me for 10 o'clock every freaking Wednesday morning. So I missed most of the class because I had to work. And when I confronted her about it, as I did, she said, well, that's stupid. You shouldn't be an actress. You should be a manager here at Walden Books. And I was like, that's a dumb thing to be. And I was like, so aspiring to be a manager at a Walden Books should be my life's dream. That's so much more noble than being an actor. What the hell are you talking about, woman? You want to be a lawyer, and instead of going to school to become a lawyer, you're here making our lives miserable because you won't do what you love in life, so you're going to punish everybody else who's doing what they love, like me, So she tried to pressure me into becoming a manager, and I was having none of it because the manager made it so difficult. But then I made some really great friends there, including, I'm trying to remember who I lived with. Oh, I remember I lived with, her name was Diane.
Joel?
Diane and Michael I lived with.
Oh, that's right. You lived with them for a while.
I lived with them until I moved back in with you guys. I stayed with them. They lived in an awesome older home in Denver. I really loved that house. Diane drove me crazy because she was very new agey and was always telling me what colors I should wear and, about my astrological sign and telling me how I was, any problems I had were because I'd been a bad person in a past life or, I got to where I would roll my eyes, just not say anything because it's her house and I'm living there. So Michael and I had an incident that she never found out about where she was not there. She was at work. She had been an RN. I don't think she was anymore. I think she was doing something else at that time. She was, and I met them through ACT Studios.
Well, that's good.
But Michael was there during the day, and I was in my room, which was an open room. I didn't really have a door. So I could hear...
Doors are good.
I could hear... No, it's not. I could hear the two of them often in the middle of the night. Which was awkward. And So I was in my room. I don't remember what I was doing, and he and I were talking. I turned my back for a minute, and he came up and put his arms around me and started nuzzling my neck. And I just froze. I had no idea what to do. It was like,
Was he high?
No, he was cold, stone sober, and he came up and put his arms around me and started nuzzling my neck, and I just froze. And I think he got the message that I was uncomfortable, because he very awkwardly kind of backed away and said, okay, and walked out of the room. It was like, I'm not going to, Diane's my friend, and I'm living in her house. I'm not going to do that to her, for God's sake. I liked Michael, and he was an attractive man, but geez,
Yeah.
That was like crazy. But I never said word one to her. He and I never spoke about it again, but now you're hearing about it. So it's not something I talk to many people about, because it was just weird.
Yeah.
So
I think the word you're looking for is creepy.
Yes. So I lived with Diane and Michael, and then I decided, and your dad and I were going to a marriage counselor at the time. He was the head of the church educational program there, and like the seminary and all that stuff in Denver. He was a really nice guy. I really liked him. And he determined that we were not going to get back together. So he was basically talking to us to help us deal with separation and divorce, especially Richard, who was not handling this well, which is understandable. I don't blame Richard for that. I learned some things from him too. I talked about being shy, and he said, "You're not shy. You're reserved. There's a big difference." And I thought, oh, that makes sense. I'm very cautious around people. For a whole lot of reasons. I'm very cautious around people, mostly my childhood.
I think we have about 29 episodes that explains why you're shy about some things.
Anyway, so one of the great things I love about Skip is that he's an extrovert. He's very good at talking to people. So, when Skip and I were dating, he was awesome, because we'd be at a party or some kind of gathering or something. And before meeting him, my way of handling parties was to freaking hide in the corner and just watch people until I felt comfortable enough to come out. He was awesome, because we'd be in a circle of people, and he'd be talking, and they'd be having an animated conversation. Eventually I would say something after about 20 minutes, after I've judged the temperature of the group and the conversation. Then I could come in and say something and feel safe. And people just saw me as always being part of the conversation. So it rubs off on me, that good impression, And
that makes sense.
I would come across as being warmer than I actually. I'm a warm person, but I tend to keep my distance until I feel safe. It's been awkward here in California, because I have trouble. People here are lovely. They're really lovely. They're kind, and they're generous, and they're friendly for the most part. There's some that aren't.
We're talking about you, Bob. You specifically. Yes, you hearing this right now.
But most people here are pretty cool. I really like the people here that for the most part, that I've met here in California. And very accepting and very forgiving, and they give you a lot more leeway than they do in, say, Georgia. And I'm not talking about the theater community in Georgia. I'm talking about Georgia at large. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, he said you're not shy, you're reserved. And that made sense to me. Okay, well, that's something I know about myself now that helps me interact with other human beings. And certainly helped me when Skip and I started dating, and I was able to use that dynamic to be more comfortable around people. what else did I can't remember what else. Oh, and he started telling me things about Richard that he probably shouldn't have told me, but he did. Among them were I think he understood why Richard and I were not getting along, and he sympathized with me. He never came out and said exactly that, but he understood a lot of it and seemed to not take my side per se, but understand my position. One of the things he pointed out, he said, I had to tell Richard to bathe. He said, "You stink. I can smell you." Because Richard, especially, even after I left, he was only, once he found out, I think, we already talked about this, I think, that after he found out that, I was horrified. That's where I found this out, because I had a very limited sense of smell, and did not know that my husband was not bathing. And all I could think was, all these years I've been with him at church gatherings and work gatherings, and people are probably looking at me and saying, why don't you tell your husband to bathe? I didn't know he smelled. So the marriage counselor tells me I had to tell him to bathe. You stink. Because he wasn't bathing. It's like, that was a major revelation. Then he started telling me other things, about Richard as we got further along, starting in about the 70s, he became so controlling. And I'm sure that was because of directives from the general authorities, which we already talked about. But
Ezra Taft Benson.
Yeah, not one of my favorite people. Anyway, he held out a dollar bill to Richard. He was holding a dollar bill, and so that it's flat. And he said to Richard, "Take this dollar bill away from me." And so Richard would grab onto it, and his fingers would just slide off. And he said, "That's what you're trying to control her is like." He used that. He used a lot of analogies for Richard, which I think he understood by the time he remarried. He was a lot different with Vivian than he was with me, which is a good thing. And
I would agree with that.
As he's gotten older, he has apparently changed in a lot of ways, which is good. So
I would also agree with that.
We all grow. I've certainly changed a lot.
Except you, Bob. You don't grow at all. Anyway, sorry.
Anyway, so that was among the things. So then I decided I was going to get an apartment after I graduated. I was going to get an apartment and move into it with the 3 girls, and Richard was going to keep the 3 boys. And boy, Randy was so angry. He was so angry. "Why are you taking the girls, Mom? Why are you taking the girls and not the boys?" He always felt shortchanged by me. And I felt badly about that. And I felt guilty because I didn't want to break the kids up, but that's how Richard had put it to me. "You're only getting 3 of them. I'm getting 3 of them. I don't care which 3." And he literally said that. "I don't care which." And I'm being angry, and I shouldn't be that, because that was a long time ago, and he was hurt and he was angry. And that's where that was coming out of. But he did say, "I'm getting 3 of them. I don't care which 3, but I'm getting 3. So that's how we divided it up. And so a friend of mine from college, one of the kids I graduated with, was managing an apartment complex, and she helped get me an apartment. I made a down payment, $400, which I couldn't afford, but I made a down payment. And Michael and Diane, and I don't know if Richard helped me move or not, but Michael and Diane helped me move into this apartment. And I spent one night there. I spent the whole night crying because I could not bear the thought of breaking up my children. I felt like my children belonged together. And I didn't want to leave the boys. I wanted all my children together. What I should have done was what the first divorce attorney that Diane recommended to me wanted. He said, you should have all the children, you should get child support, you should get alimony, etc. And I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to put my children through a battle. I always meant so well, and I always screwed it up badly. I'm starting to cry here. That's not good. Anyway, so I spent the entire night crying. And the next day, told Richard and the marriage counselor I wanted to move back in. And the marriage counselor asked me, are you moving in because you want to work on the relationship or because of the children? And I said, I want to work on the relationship. And at the time I did. I thought it was a possibility. I was very naive. So Richard and you kids, because Michael and Diane were disgusted with me, because they'd gone through all that work to get me into this apartment, and then I was there one day, and of course I lost my deposit on the on the apartment. And so they helped me move back in the house. And did we talk about this the last time, about him putting me on an allowance and all that stuff?
No.
Okay. Did we talk about the rape?
No.
Okay. Yeah, the first night I was back, he raped me, which kind of ended any chance of us working anything out. And I told the marriage counselor about it. And again, he sympathized. And Richard put me on an allowance. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it was $400 a month. And everything had to come out of that. Including groceries. So I had $100 a month for groceries for 8 people. And that's for groceries, for shampoo, for clothes, for everything, for 8 people.
I'm curious about something. What year was this again? 86, wasn't it?
It was 85. It was the year my father died. And I'll go back and talk about that in a minute, but I just want to get through this much.
Yeah, translated, that comes out to $250 for 8 people today.
Yep. Well, anyway, that's one of the ways your father punished, was monetarily. He didn't do a lot of hitting. Well, no, that's not true, because he did hit the kids, but he didn't hit me. But he liked monetary punishments for not doing what he wanted. And even though I no longer considered myself Mormon, he still took the Mormon approach to things, which at that time was not good. And I remember going back to church and everybody going, "Oh, you're bad, bad!" And I was crying because I did not want to be there. I did not want to be there. I was there for my children, primarily. But that being at church made me miserable. And pretty much being at most churches since has made me miserable. I hate being in churches. I know a lot of really good religious people that I love. I know good Mormon people. I have children who are good Mormon people. But I don't like being at church, and I don't like being in the Mormon church. I went a couple of times with Christy when I visited her in Houston. And it was okay, but that's just not my thing. As my mother would say, I'm not a joiner. Not anymore, anyway. But I tried to be a joiner. I tried really hard to fit into some group, and I just don't fit into most groups, really. I fit in California better than I've ever fit in any place in my entire life, because so many of these people are so much more accepting. But it's the only place where I've ever just, I could walk around in my geeky t-shirts and everything else and feel comfortable. because they all go, "Oh, I love your shirt," you know. It's awesome. So, anyway, yeah, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, we ended up separating. Again, and I left January of '86. And then I moved in with a coworker. I think her name was Sharon. And that was just a weird mess. I moved in with a family that was going through some serious dysfunctional stuff. Sharon was awesome. Her brother was insane, and he lived with us in the basement. We each had our own rooms. We didn't pay rent, which was good, because I didn't have any money. So, but so the dad just wanted us to do things around the house, like yard work and stuff. So, and Sharon had a rat named Rupert. I learned to really love rats because Rupert was awesome. He was really cool. Of course, rats don't live very long. I was really sad when he died, but yeah, rats are cool. So anyway, that situation was insane. So then I ended up moving. Joel Fatinos was the assistant manager at Walden Books, and he and I got along really well. And he would come over to Sharon's apartment and we would exercise. I was still being educated. I was so stupid about so many things. I was still holding some of my conservative views about things, including gay people. And Joel would come over in the mornings before work and we would work out together. And one day we were sitting there after we were working out, and I started saying some bull crap about gay people, and Joel looked at me and said, "Josie, I'm gay." And I thought, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. I had no problem with it whatsoever. With all these stupid ideas I had been holding since I was Mormon, I had no problem with him being gay at all. None. So that began an education for me that was really awesome. He just began educating me. And sometimes I was pretty friggin' insensitive. But, he would educate me. I learned to be more sensitive. I learned a lot more. And of course, in the theater community, I was working with lots and lots and lots of gay people. So I learned to get over all the nonsense and let go of it. Let's see, what else? Going back to my father, January of '85, to help me out financially, the director of the theater department, the costume, the guy who managed the costumer and the guy who managed the costume shop quit for some reason. I don't remember why. So there was no costumer or manager for the costume shop. So they hired a woman outside of the costume shop who had her own costuming, dressmaking business. She became the costumer, and I ran the costume shop. So,
and you did this while working at Walden Books too?
Trying to remember. You know what? I wasn't working at Walden Books until the summer of '85. I didn't start working at Walden Books until after I graduated.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's what happened. So it's hard to remember some of these things because it's been years since I've talked about it. So, so that's what happened with that. So I wasn't going to college and working at Walden Books at the same time, other than that one tap class I tried to take.
I do remember the tap class.
Yeah.
Not much about it, but I do remember
Well, and I came home and taught you kids, especially the girls, I taught them tap steps, from my lesson,
nice.
What little I got to take. But anyway, so they put me in charge of the costume shop, and they put me on a combination of, I forget what it's called. in college where they give you a job and basically pay you minimum wage. It's work study or something like that.
That is a thing they do. Yes.
Yeah. So that was like $3.50 an hour, and then they gave me $1.50 an hour on top of that to bring it up to $5 an hour, which was not bad then. The costumer and I did not get along real well because she was very self-absorbed. In January, like the first or second week of January, I got a call from my mother that my father was in the hospital and dying. So I left to go to see him in the hospital for like 3 days before he died. And then I came back, and then he died April 20th. And I think I went for like a week for that. And the school was doing Jesus Christ Superstar. And so we had all these costumes we were making, and I was in the costume sewing, but I was still going to classes. Well, she wouldn't let me go to class because we had gotten behind on costuming for Jesus Christ Superstar because I had gone to my father's funeral. And one of my teachers asked why I wasn't in class, and I told her, and she went ballistic and went off on the costumer, which made my life hell for the rest of the year. I did my best. I graduated. I got out of that mess. One of the things I did after school closed, before I moved back in with your father, or had I already moved? Oh, that was the other thing that I didn't mention. When we were separated, the story has been put out that I just basically abandoned everybody. And I never, I didn't have anything to do with the family after that. That wasn't true, because I was living with Michael and Diane, and the school Lynchburg College was like 20 minutes away from where they lived. Your house was like 30 minutes away from where I was living. So I was going every morning. I was getting up early, weekdays. I was getting up, going to the house to spend like a half an hour with you kids, and then going to school, as well as working in the shop. And it was hard because every time I would go home, Jenny would cry and say, "When are you and Daddy getting back together?" And I would have to tell her we're not. And she would cry and cry and cry. I felt so bad. What can you do? That was the reality. So, she was like, how old was she then? She was like 3.5,
Young.
something like that. 85, and she was born in 81, so she just barely turned 4, and Julie was 5. So it was really hard on them, but, I tried every morning to see you guys, and then I tried to see you at night when I could, when I wasn't working. Anyway, so... Oh, and I was working at, was that when I was working at Eastern Onion? Yes, it was. I was working at Eastern Onion singing telegrams as well.
I remember that.
So,
I always wanted to have enough money to order an Eastern Onion telegram on somebody. But anyway.
And that was pretty good money, until they decided to try to pressure me into doing stripograms, which I wouldn't do. For one thing, I've given birth 6 times, so I have stretch marks. I don't have an attractive tummy. And 2, I have 6 children, and I'm not going to do stripograms. I'm just not doing it. So, the work that I had been doing that was awesome started drying up. because they were trying to pressure me into doing stripograms, which would have paid more, but I'm not doing that. So, no. So I had to quit Eastern Onion singing telegrams. And trying to remember if I did that before I left your father. Might have been. No, it wouldn't. I wouldn't have needed it until after I left your father. So, and notice I say I left your father. I didn't leave you kids. If I could have just had you guys and not be married to anybody, I would have been happy. I would have been really, really happy, and that's probably what I should have done. But, when I left, I didn't ask for anything. I should have asked for alimony. I should have asked for some kind of support so I could go back to school and get some kind of a marketable skill, so I didn't have to keep scrambling through taking paper routes and everything else to survive. At one point I had like 3 retail jobs. I worked at
I remember
Walden
that.
Books.
I distinctly remember where you were literally working 3 jobs and still starving to death.
I was working at Walden Books, Musicland, and I was working at a tuxedo rental place. Let's see, what else? Yeah. So after I graduated from college, I did talk about my dad dying. It just amazed me that woman was so harsh on me when my father had died. I was 35 and my father had died. And I felt like my father and I had so many unresolved issues. We did. We had a lot of unresolved issues, things that we hadn't talked about. And I loved my father, but at the same time, I was so angry with him. And so I did a whole lot of crying. I still do. I still have dreams where he's choking me on the stairs and I bite him. I bite the living hell out of him,
Why don't you mention a little bit about what the funeral was like, and that might be a good stopping point for the episode.
Okay. Well, the whole family was there. My mother's family was there. None of you guys were there, but my mother was there. And all of her living sisters and nieces and nephews and, everybody who was alive in my mother's family was there. And he had a military funeral. Military chaplain spoke, and he was awesome. My mother, in doing research for this, found out my father had medals she didn't even know he had. He had a lot of medals. He was a war hero. He gave for his country. And he had a 21-gun salute at the end. Full honors. And I bawled like a crazy person through the whole thing. I was inconsolable. I just cried. I mean, literally, I'm sure the whole cemetery could hear me, not just the people at the funeral. I just howled. And he tried so hard to comfort me, and I just wouldn't be comforted.
He?
The chaplain, the military chaplain.
Got it.
Tried to console me and comfort me, and he spoke directly to me. And I embarrassed everybody, especially my mother, who sat there with not even her eyes watering because she was...
I know exactly the expression she would have had.
She was just very stoic. At one point when, I came back to visit her when I was still living in Denver, I tried to talk to her about some of the past, and she was like, well, you always cried so easily. And I said, that's because I was crying for 3 people, Mama.
That is true.
So, yeah, I just screamed like a banshee through the whole thing, howled. And I was embarrassed, but there was not a thing I could do to stop it. It just was what came out. Yeah. But it was beautiful, you've been to the cemetery there. That's where we buried my mom next to him. And it's beautiful up there in the mountains, in Black Mountain. And her family is all there. And that was that. So, and then I went back to work. Went back to the same thing I had been doing, getting up in the morning and coming to see you kids and then going to school and work. And then at night, either rehearsing for a show or working backstage for a show or working on costumes for a show or something. I was an extremely busy person.
That I also remember.
Yep. So...
You had to be.
Yeah, I did. Well, we'll talk about all of that another time after I moved out the second time. But basically, after that first night, after which, your father rolled off me and he cried, I just kind of lay there in shock. But he cried himself to sleep. And it took me a long time to call it what it was. And I'm sure he wouldn't call it that. But that's what it was. There was no warning that anything was going to happen. There was no snuggling. There was no touching of any kind. No words. No nothing. It just happened and then it was over with and your father cried himself to sleep. So after that, it was a matter of the marriage counselor and me waiting for him to accept reality, which he eventually did. And he said, I think you need to move out. And I said, I do too. And so I did.
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, at Amazon and other markets. RedAnvilCreative.com contains all our podcasts. Copyright 2021.
To fight the forces of evil!